Good morning, and I'm sorry we're a little bit late this morning. We are having some challenges, a few technical difficulties here. We certainly have no air conditioning here at City Hall with the storm. You probably noticed me without a jacket, but we're working as hard as we can to get things picked up, and we appreciate your patience. First off, for the most part, we've come through the storm unscathed. We've had minor issues here and there. Obviously, the air conditioning here at City Hall, we will get that back up and running. But by and large, outside of a few power outages, I'm told we had very few substantial damages to city infrastructure. We are working right now with Gulf Power to make sure that all power interruptions get replaced. And we are also evaluating drainage. I do know there are a couple of places I've received some comments about drainage. Certainly in the south end, we have the waters very high right now. I'm looking at the bay, how high it is. It's almost up to the bulkhead out there that goes across the little marina that we were talking about at the Maritime Park. So the water's very high right now, but as that subsides, we'll see the flooding come out. We don't have any rain at this particular time. So outside of those issues, we are coming through the storm in a fairly good way. Leads me to a couple things I want to address about this past weekend. I certainly enjoyed my visit to the protests that were at the Graffiti Bridge. And I think for the most part, by and large, most everything that is happening there is happening the way that we as citizens in the city of Pensacola would like to see them happening. There's an opportunity to exchange ideas and exchange hear voices and be able to communicate. And for the most part, that was getting done certainly on Saturday. And I enjoyed my time there seeing H.K. Matthews, several other individuals there that spoke, and I thought it was a fairly good meeting while we were there at the bridge, at the trestle. What then happened is there was kind of a strange march to the bridge, and about 2/3 of the people went back, 3/4 of the people went back to the trestle. And I know that I've talked at length with Kyle Cole, who has been out there taking this on, Kyle Productions. And he's certainly been working there on it and wanted to come back. Obviously, some individuals with the Dream Defenders went and blocked the bridge. That is where we got into a challenge. Not that, again, my bigger thing that I wanted to communicate from there, I'm absolutely committed to change. And the discussions we're having with the trestle are exactly the kind of discussions we need to be having in the change we're moving forward. On Friday, we announced that we had already tasked Dr. Cedric Alexander with moving forward on our Citizens Committee. And in the discussions that we had there, whether they were on the bridge or on the trestle, that would not have changed. I think there were some things that happened yesterday and all the confusion that went forward. We are not agreeing to all the demands. It's okay not to agree in all this challenge we have, but we are looking for is places where we can agree that are going to move our community forward. Toward that end, I do believe the committee moving forward is a good thing, and I believe working to make sure that we get all groups that can participate on that committee is a good thing. However, at no time the act to go into the middle of the road and block the bridge and potentially risk people's lives and create emergency situations with people stuck on the bridge was absolutely rash, inappropriate, irresponsible, and did not help the movement go forward any. There are some communications that I made on Sunday, and I want to be very clear of what I was saying. We didn't agree on everything, but I absolutely have no problem agreeing to the committee, and I absolutely have no problem agreeing to Ms. Morissette being a part of that committee. But that could have all happened. There was a gentleman, Chris, that I was with on the side of the road out of the construction area that was outside of either 17th or Bayfront or the bridge. If we had come to that point and had that discussion, we could have had that same discussion there without getting into the road and potentially creating both hazards to individuals as well as potentially security problems if anybody had an emergency trying to get across the bridge. So along those lines, that is something that we cannot do going forward. I believe as we move forward in what's happening, I certainly have not always communicated the best. And yesterday, I should have said the point I was trying to make was There was nothing that was done in the road that couldn't have been done out of the road. But at this particular time, I do not believe there was any need to pull the people out of there at that particular time. But I think now going forward, I think we want to be very clear. Any attempt to create a situation that would create a potential challenge to public safety in regard for security for life will end up creating problems not only for what happens there and the individuals that are there at the intersection. It'll also create problems for us moving forward with this committee that we want to do. I'm happy to move forward, but only in the way that we're all working in a way that does not create hazards to public safety or public health. So toward that end, as we move forward, I would like to look at all of us from a point of forgiveness of what happened over the weekend. Those things are gone and forgotten and forgiven. But going forward, the only way we can keep track on this process for this committee and the inclusion of that committee, eventually of Ms. Morissette being included on that committee, is by us all working together and keeping from having any more foolishness that ends up potentially risking human life. We don't need to block any bridges. We don't need to do any destruction. We can continue to keep working on this and have this discussion. Towards that end, on a couple of things as well, I did want to say I communicated this morning with Kyle Cole about what's happening at the trestle. Obviously, there's a lot of traffic challenges with 17th, the bridge, a variety of things. This Tuesday is George Floyd's funeral, and I communicated to Mr. Cole that if they wanted to stay there through Wednesday, that was fine and certainly understandable. However, after that, we need to be working on a different location that perhaps does not create so much traffic confusion and congestion or potential risk of impact and somebody getting hit. I've suggested a location, even City Hall certainly has an area to the north that can be worked through. There are other places, and Mr. Cole was going to get together with me after this. We're going to talk about that. But there's no doubt that the traffic problems we have and a number of things happening at the trestle just don't make this as conducive to what we want to do. So we're continuing to look at that, but we realize it's got to move somewhere from there because we don't need anybody getting hurt. At the same time, I enjoyed my time there. I know I talked with Jeremy, and I think the most important thing that we were discussing about that is respect. If we are truly going to make impactful changes to the community that change the lives for everyone in a productive way that creates a more inclusive and a better Pensacola, then we are going to need to be more respectful to each other. Again, my point is I get it. I understand I'm a public servant, and again, we disagree and people say things, but my goal has never to been disrespectful to any group. I certainly understand there were a number of things that were said to me, and as I talked to Jeremy Morrison, said he talked to about 90% of the people of the bridge, didn't even think I would show up because certainly the negative things have been said about me. But I've never been concerned about what is about me. The issue I want to do is continue to push this community forward. That's why I ran for this position. That's why I sit here today, and that's why I continue to keep working on that. But we've got to do it in a way that is lawful and works everything together. And part of that is dialogue. And I'm committed to having dialogue together as long as we don't have any acts that potentially jeopardize public safety like we did when the bridge got blocked. That's the fastest way, again, to move off the message and halt the change that we're seeing and get off message is by doing those things that pull us away from that. So I ask you to continue to think about that. Now, one of the things I addressed the other day, a lot of these things have been in process for a while. The city of Pensacola didn't have to wait for the George Floyd incident to happen to be changing. We began this process last year, and last August I did meet with Dream Defenders. They came forward with a number of demands, some of which are still out there today, some of which I simply communicated to them I could not do. The city does not have a mechanism that allows. There are about 3 of them that deal with laws. And again, I want to make very clear to the entire public, my commitment to you is I'm not going to change something that you don't have the opportunity to vote on. Whatever we do as a democratic society, it ought to be on what the people vote on. I did make the protesters there aware, the Dream Defenders, of opportunities that they could either look at the state or even the city level if they wanted to bring forward change that would be voted on all of us. All of us ought to have a say in what those things are. So again, there are a number of demands that were in there that we were not going to be able to work with, and we've tried to explain why and again alternatives and ways to go in other directions. With that said, we met last year. There were several things we said we could do. One, we were immediately asked to take 4 individuals that showed up at the Tamar Crawford shooting and fire those individuals and name them without even going through getting our own internal process done. And remind you that back in August last year, the state was still doing their investigation. We didn't get that back until September. In September, the City of Pensacola held their own investigation. And again, what I tell people about our police is they are great men and women that are working hard to do what is right for this community. And you know why I say that? Because in the instance with Tamar Crawford, 4 individual police officers were there, and only 1 pulled their gun and shot it, and ended up discharging it in a way that was outside of our rules. The other 3 individuals totally operated within the rules that they were supposed to be governed by. That tells me that we don't have a systemic problem. We've got a people problem. We agreed that training was a part of that. We also agreed that we would hold those officers accountable. It's one of the things that we said the other day. And many of the individuals that were with H.K. Matthews and other individuals that have been through the civil rights process for a long time told me, listen, that's the first time the City of Pensacola has dismissed an officer for not obeying the rules. So again, I think all of our police force understands the rules are there and they will be held accountable to those rules. Everyone will be. But the problem is also that means citizens. We have rules that we have to abide by, and we will be held accountable to those rules as well. And I think the idea of this committee is to continue to figure out that balance of how we do that to make sure that we all are operating within the rules. But the application of enforcement is done in a fair and inclusive way. We're going to continue to be focused on that. And again, we stepped up and held an officer accountable. The other 3 officers who did nothing more than respond and totally obeyed the entire time, those individuals should not have been fired, and they weren't. But again, if we're going to say no justice, no peace, then we need justice. And if the 3 individuals that did nothing more than comply with all the rules that we have, those individuals should have been reinstated as they were. We then moved forward and again said training was going to be something that we believed was essential to what we were doing. We also indicated that we would do for Tamar Crawford's family. We offered psychological evaluation from Lakeview. I called them. Lakeview offered to the family, and it was offered for them to be able to get psychological evaluation for up to a year, and we offered that at that time. The other thing that we also did was we said we were going to do training. That training began in November. We went out and hired Dr. Cedric Alexander, who is world-renowned basically for dealing with law enforcement. He's an African-American law enforcement officer who is from Pensacola, has retired back to Pensacola, and is certainly here to give his expertise. Unfortunately, in November, we had December coming up, so he didn't get a chance to start his training until January. But at the same time, we said first deliverable was training, second deliverable was looking at this committee. He started that training in January and was 95% through about mid-March when all of a sudden we got hit with COVID. Obviously, everything stopped with COVID. We've lost about 2.5 to 3 months with COVID, but we are coming back out of it now, which is exactly why we contact him back again. And on Friday, I know that Lawrence Powell, Keith Wilkins, and myself met with Dr. Alexander, and we set him forward on doing this process. We asked him about where do we go. And his first statement is that he felt like we needed to find out what the community wanted. And he wanted the opportunity to do somewhere between 4 to 6 town halls, one of which I will say is going to be virtual. For those of you who are out there who don't feel comfortable going out at this particular time, There's going to be a virtual town hall that will allow you to communicate without having to go out. That was one of the requirements. But he wants to have town halls north, south, east, west parts of the community. He wants to go all over, and he wants to have one that's virtual so that those individuals who feel they can't get out and want to voice their opinion have an opportunity to do so. At this point, that's most of the details I've got. He's working through it, but we tasked him on that on Friday. To begin setting that and to begin working forward. We communicated that out in a statement late on Friday that we were moving forward with that. We got to the bridge, as I said the other day, and again, when I asked significantly several times for the group to come over out of the road into the construction area. It wouldn't have changed my position one way or the other. What I do not mind necessarily, and I've always thought somehow in having the group involved, we want to have as many different voices involved. So again, from my perspective, I should have communicated better that the issue is not about what we did or didn't do there, but what we were going to allow to happen and what would have happened outside the road or inside the road. And again, we don't want to be in a situation where people are going back in the middle of the road again. That is going to slow our process down. It's going to slow Dr. Alexander. It's going to slow the city. So we don't need that anymore. But we need to keep working forward to make sure that we get the change that we want to see and the opportunity to be a more inclusive community and working together. That's what we have said from the very beginning from last August. We continue to move forward on all of those things, and I believe we will be able to create things that make us a better community. As I've said before, we have talked about wanting to move forward with finding a different location. Obviously, challenges happen right there with 17th Avenue, and there's some concern that it's only a matter of time before something happens there. So we really have talked to the organizers there about trying to find a different location in moving from 17th Avenue because of the challenges that it has. But certainly for the most part, that the group has been very good and certainly in being nonviolent in trying to work for solutions. I'm not going to let the actions of a few people dismiss the whole idea and movement and conversation that has happened. We need to keep having that going forward. But I do want to caution very clearly that if we see this behavior happen going forward, it will slow the process and it will grind it to a halt. But at this point, if we can stay focused on a protest movement that is nonviolent, that does not create potential hazards to individuals by blocking their access or potentially putting them in harm's way of cars, we will be figuring out ways that we can continue to talk. One of the ways that was brought up, though, that I do want to say real quick at the first time I sort of heard it going into Saturday, but one of the first things we had heard about was the hill up on Palafox and the statue in the park we have there. I'm going to say at this particular time, I think if what we're doing right now with our commitment to our community and the committee we're trying to set up is fragile enough and is far more important in what we're going to do for moving a more inclusive community than at this point a symbolic gesture. So I want to stay focused on that. I'm not saying at some point as we move forward in time, we realize as we tell our history, we've got to be respectful and inclusive, that we don't see change. But I don't believe that now is the time. Now is the time for us to stay focused on what we're currently doing and to continue that process. So we're going to continue to move forward in that way. And again, I'm not saying there may not be change at some point, but now is not the right time. There's too much challenge and discord that we have in just moving forward with what we've got. And I do believe that a lot of the challenges that were expressed over the weekend were not necessarily related to the committee, the individuals, or anything else. It was very much related to there was a significant concern with the individuals blocking traffic and what that potentially would have done to anybody that was on the bridge. So again, we try to be very clear, but I think we can only do sort of one of those things at this particular time. And I believe much of what we're sitting on top of Palafox Hill, we will look at that and see what we can do at some time. But now is not the time. Want to move forward to the things we want to talk to you about here with COVID-19. There are 815 cases of COVID-19 in Escambia County. Right now, our hospitalizations as of yesterday, June 7th, were 9 in our 3 hospitals. So we have seen that come down. The latest update from the state shows about a 0.7% test rate for June 6th and a positive test rate for 0.3 on June 5th. So again, we encourage you to continue to follow CDC guidelines. As I said, I was very happy to see multiple people at the event with masks. And I think if you're going to be out there in public, we certainly need to be doing that as much as we can, and continue to follow CDC guidelines. But we are continuing to work that. One of the things I know that developed on Friday was a consistent conversation was fireworks. The Sertoma Club in May, as we looked to things, we didn't know where we were going to be in May. But again, we were dealing with the challenges of understanding how we would get that many people together. Sertoma had pulled out in May, but we continue to have discussions similar to the group that was having the symphony and some of the things at the Wahoo Park and Wahoo Stadium going forward in June. Well, we met in early June on June 1st with them. The symphony indicated it really wasn't, they want to keep doing this, but they didn't think that this was the time and that they ought to come back next year. So again, I think Sertoma, I think the Pensacola Symphony are definitely looking at coming back in 2021 with a very strong 4th of July, but they didn't want to compromise a number of things in 2020 and just not knowing where we were. However, we are very focused on trying to find a way to make sure there are fireworks in downtown Pensacola. I know there is already, we've been in communications with a group that is going to be the Blue Wahoos will be doing a show. They will have fireworks there. It is a ticketed show with a movie that will be going on in their stadium. And again, some of the park area will be closed because of the fireworks. But some of the areas obviously will be open outside the stadium, but that's mainly a ticket event inside the stadium. But there will be places from the city that you can see those fireworks outside. But again, we also have been talking. There's another group that has done the New Year's Day, New Year's Eve fireworks, and they are currently talking. I communicated with the county commissioners about an opportunity to find if there was some funding in the Sertoma group, since they weren't going to do it, to be able to help that. I did make that communication with the county. And I did send those individuals there. They hope to fire them off, similar to what they've done for New Year's Eve, off the Seville Tower. So again, that's still a possibility. We are obviously looking at fireworks, and the city would love to see fireworks happen. But I can tell you the Blue Wahoos will be doing a show in basically sort of where the amphitheater is along the shoreline there. They will be doing fireworks show on 4th of July. Virtual city council meetings this week. Just a reminder that today we will have the city council agenda conference at 3:30, followed by the CRA. Both will be conducted virtually. Visit cityofpensacola.com for information about how to participate and provide input. The city council meeting will be conducted virtually also on Thursday, June 12th at 5:30. All meetings will be live streamed at cityofpensacola.com/video. Finally, we will also have the mayor's cleanup will be coming up. There's one scheduled for June 27th in the Sanders Beach neighborhood. Neighborhood cleanups allow the city sanitation customers to clean up their bulk and other eligible items to be picked up from the curb for free. More information and to view a map on the cleanup for June, visit cityofpensacola.com. Also, you probably saw some over the weekend. Last week, I submitted a letter to Space Florida to be considered to host the headquarters for the U.S. Space Command. The letter will be reviewed by Space Florida and be submitted to the governor for his approval. I will say this is a very long shot, but in some ways we have capabilities, and I didn't want us not to at least make an effort. So the city of Pensacola is trying to make an effort on that line and become more involved in aerospace than we already are in the things that we're doing here. Finally, Visit Pensacola app. Visit Pensacola has launched a new experience Pensacola app designed to help residents and guests plan for a perfect day in Pensacola. Locals and visitors can find dining, current events, trails, and more with this app. This is an excellent tool for businesses to share with their guests and aid in finding more things to do while visiting in locations nearby. It's available for download free at the Apple App Store and Google Play. Much of this is what we want to do as we communicate downtown what's going on and what and sort of what we have available and how to find parking spaces and a variety of other things. We believe as we turn to that app, it will give us more opportunity to make sure that you understand better where to go, how to see things, and what to do in your experience downtown, not just for visitors, but also for locals. So again, we highly encourage you to look at picking up that app. Finally, in looking at this, obviously we've made a lot of discussions about things and challenges, and I think it's important to understand that disagreements happen and you don't always get what you're looking for. Case in point, certainly I've been trying to find a way from the transition report to continue to open community centers on Saturdays, and we continue to do that. But last week, even if you're the mayor of the city of Pensacola, doesn't mean you don't get things that end up happening what you want. The city council clearly said they did not want to look at taking the money to help fund the community centers from what was happening. They had from a legal counsel position that they had open. This just goes to show that no matter where you are, we all deal with challenges in what we do, but we don't have to go block roads. We don't have to endanger people to potentially get what our way. That's the most important thing. If those things happen, they will actually hurt our progress and keep us from moving forward and slow the process down of what we're wanting to do. So as long as we can keep focused on doing things appropriately and working with it, the dialogue will always be open for us to discuss and find ways to do it. But if our true intent is to be working toward what we want to do and make changes, then the only way to do that is to be respectful. And we won't always agree, but that doesn't mean we have to be disrespectful in our disagreement. If we can remain respectful, I'm convinced that will do more to end the challenges that we all want to end, whether it's racism, marginalism, all kind of things that we talk about. If we come to the conversation with respect, we will be able to do more than we otherwise would. Casey, I'm open for questions and ready to hear what people have to ask.
All right. Well, first of all, I have a couple of corrections. I forgot to update the number of cases in Escambia, so it's actually 891 and not 815. And also the CRA is not meeting today, just the agenda conference. So it's definitely a Monday, so sorry about that. But the first question is from Andrew McKay. He said, you've made it seem like Kyle Cole was willing to move the demonstration. Is that correct?
I talked with him this morning. He was looking at that and understands that that's probably best for everyone involved based on the safety concerns. Obviously, the Floyd funeral is Tuesday, and I wanted to give him a chance to go through that event, and the people who've been there experiencing that, I think that was something that we wanted to give them. And so yes, that he seemed receptive to it. We were going to talk about it and trying to find out the safest way to continue allow for protests, but do it in a way that's safe and that we don't endanger. We got a lot of traffic in that area under the trestle. It's a very tight area for roads, and obviously with everything else happening, it's a construction site as well. So we probably could have found better locations, but certainly we understood the mural that was there. But I think we can find better locations as this moves forward. And lastly, I guess Casey, that's all right that you just proved I'm Ron Burgundy. If you put the script here in front of me, I'm going to read it. So again, we're sorry about that. We do make errors, but again, the idea about errors is when you make them, trying to come back and trying to figure out ways to improve it and move forward. And I think that's what we're all trying to do in the city.
Next question, excuse me, is from Danielle at Channel 3, and it's a few questions, so I'll ask it kind of in parts. Can you talk about what you agreed to regarding protester demands over the weekend and the goal and reasoning to do so? And can you explain where you are with the other demands made by the protesters?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. I think when you look at what was asked of us, we've number one was the committee. We've been moving forward on that since August, and we even announced Friday we had officially tasked Dr. Cedric Alexander with it, so he is moving forward with that. The other goals, there was one about deprioritization. Our challenge is again, if you want justice needs to be equal. It's equal treatment and equal measure of the law. If you don't like the law and the law is creating the problem, then you don't need to ask people not to go enforce the law. You need to get people to change the law so that they can enforce what's proper, and it needs to be done by the people, not by the entity that's there. And that's the commitment that I made. And if people want to change, the prioritization one really kind of goes back to the marijuana issue. Then that needs to be pursued a different way. As long as the law is the law, the way it is, we will have to administer. Now, things have changed within the law because of medical marijuana, and the police have had to change their protocol by which they deal with it. But we certainly have already implemented those things. But to ask us not to apply a law is like asking us, to not apply any law. The laws are there because they're made by the people who are elected or by the people to be the laws. We enforce those. And so my communication has always been, no, I can't do anything with that. I can't ask us to do that at that particular time. The third one deals with the Tamar Crawford family. I was very clear in the sense that, again, we can't just give money to people. The anticipation, what does allow that opportunity to happen is the court system. I would say the city fully expected a lawsuit. If the courts said what our liability was, we would pay, we would do whatever. If the court said we didn't have any liability, we wouldn't pay. But I think for us to do what's right by all the citizens, it needs to go through the proper process. And the proper process for that kind of restitution would be at the court level, not at the city level. I can't just write somebody a check and an invoice and go do that. That's just not the way the city's set up to function. The last two dealt with the police and the militarization, which, I even talked with Dr. Alexander on Friday about that and asked the question, what does that mean? And again, he's like, I think that's more of a national request. Certainly, as I tried to explain to the protesters, our police have not been there with them at any time in anything more than a uniform. And it's not that uniform happened. I believe that the officer who shot Tamar Crawford was not in uniform that day. He was an undercover cop. So I struggle with the militarization one. It is not our intention to create a militaristic police force, but at the same time, there are certain occasions that occur, like what happened out at NAS, and if those things were to happen again, where we had somebody that was taking innocent lives and shooting people, we would have to respond in the proper way that we would need to neutralize that individual. So then the final one was just about police and deadly force. And again, if the city of Pensacola and the residents want to vote that and decide they either don't want a police force, they don't want them to have guns or whatever else, that needs to be a decision that the citizens make, not the mayor's office. And so I tried to make that very clear, that was not something that we could do. As we went through that whole list, the issue then that came up in there was the request, and it came from, I guess Nathan Monk was talking with Haley, and he asked me, he said, would you put Haley on your committee as a representative from the mayor's office? And I said I would. It has never been my intention not to include somehow the Dream Defenders in what we do. But the problem with the Dream Defenders is not necessarily including them or doing stuff or having the dialogue. The issue is the tactics, and I think that's where the confusion came and a lot of things that came forward from upset citizens. A lot of citizens were upset because what I wanted to say, and what I should have said better on Sunday, was I would have done the same thing if we'd been in the middle of the road or we'd been on the side of the road having that discussion. My point was I was committed to working with the Dream Defenders at any point, and getting out in the middle of the road did not make me all of a sudden say I was going to work with them on it. I was going to work with them from the very beginning. What I would have liked to have done would have gotten out of the road and had this conversation right there. We could have had that Saturday outside of the roadbed, and I would have said the exact same thing, and we would have come to the exact same agreement. and we would have done it without jeopardizing people's lives, sending the guy on the hood of a car all the way to the other end of Gulf Breeze. We could have done that in a much safer way. And so my only position in this is simply saying there's a way for us to do things and there's a way not to do that. But again, we all make errors. That's kind of a forgiveness error at that point. But from now on, obviously, anything that happens like that will slow down what we can do moving forward and making changes. Anything we do like that is not that potentially endangers lives is going to have negative impacts on what we can do as a city. And so I highly encourage us to continue to work. I think the work that Mr. Cole's done and he's working with his protest has been in a way that allows for protests, allows for people to voice their concerns, but does it in a way that does not endanger life. And as long as we're doing that, we can keep it focused on the message, keep having this dialogue, and keep having this discussion. There's nothing that I agreed to in the middle of the road that I wouldn't have agreed to outside of the roadbed. And I probably could have said that better on Sunday, and I regret that I didn't. But we all could be better. And again, I make mistakes like anybody else. So the idea was we're going to continue to move forward. And at this point, we are moving forward on the committee. And at this point, I'm happy to have Ms. Morissette on the committee. But at this point, those are all sort of conditional on us being able to keep moving forward in a way that's in the right spirit of what we want to do. And again, we cannot go disrupt traffic and again put people potentially in danger of their lives. That's just not the right way to do it.
And this is another part of Danielle's question. Do you have plans to reach out to any other governing agencies or individuals since some of the demands are outside of the mayor's purview?
The ones that are outside the mayor's purview, I think we tried to explain where we were going. Those will be addressed by those entities. I'll be more than happy to help direct them to the right areas that they need. I think point number 2 is the state. Point number 3 is the courts, and points 4 and 5 are really if they wanted to pull something together in the Charter Review Commission. So I have no problem pointing them in the right direction. But again, these are really going to be dependent. A lot of these are on the voters. We will do whatever we end up doing at the ballot box. And again, I'll say that one thing for what Kyle was doing and what their group was doing. They had somebody down there registering people to vote. People who vote. That's the way we do things in this community. It's not, as somebody said, we don't try to take things hostage and do something else. That's not the way we do things in our community. We do them by a democratic vote that's fair and allows everybody to vote, and we move on. You win some, you lose some. I've certainly done that in my life, and there are things which I even discussed today at the end of this press conference from my end of things where I've not always gotten my way, but we work through them. We keep working, and it's certainly I don't ever lose respect for the individuals, even when they disagree with me. I've had a number of people I have disagreements with. For the most part, I'm still able to be friends with them. I can still work all the things. Diane Crummell and I have gone together, and she's called me on some of these things, and we've talked and we've had good conversations. If Diane and I could go through as much as we went through and still be friends, then I think that we're open to do anything and have that dialogue. But it doesn't mean we're going to see things the exact same way. But it may lead us to not everything that is requested we can do, but it will begin to move us into areas that we do find common ground. But we cannot do it, and it won't work, and it will halt the progress of those things if we jeopardize people, if we create destruction of property. Any of those things won't work. And I want to say one thing about Kyle. That day, he was very upset about it. He said, this is not what my movement was about, and he explained that to me. And I said, Kyle, I understand. Keep focused on what the message is, and we'll keep working with you.
And this is also from Danielle. Were there any notable issues due to the storm last night?
Outside of the city air conditioner being off, and obviously I'm a lot hotter and sweating, which is other than that issue, we haven't found a lot of things. We obviously had some trees down. We had some lines down. Most everybody's getting their power restored. I know I talked with Casey today. She went without power for about 2 hours last night, but her power got restored. So I think now the winds have subsided. You may still hear, if we get a nice east wind, you can kind of hear a hum potentially here in my office. You hear that from the guardrails that are outside on the deck there. You'll hear a hum. I don't know if you can hear it now. I can hear it, but for the most part, the wind is beginning to subside, and what we have not seen any dramatic impacts. We have seen some minor flooding issues in some areas where the drainage is right down here by the bay. Because the bay is so high, the water can't leave. It's not like we can put the water and send it somewhere else at this particular time. We got to wait till the elevation of the water goes down. When that happens, the water will go back out. The lines are not clogged. They just can't push water out to the bay right now. But aside from that, we feel fairly spared by this storm. But I was surprised at the degree of the wind to be as far away as we were from the storm.
Next question is from Andrew. He said, it seems like Dream Defenders co-opted the demonstration and got the reward. What about Kyle Cole or Caleb?
I'll continue to work with Kyle on things that he wants to do. I mean, much of the way, one of the things that he's talking about is how do we invest in inner city youth and provide for them. One of the ways I think is the best way we can do that is have community centers open on Saturday. It is something that I put in my budget, and we're going to put forward to the council. I may not win. I may lose on that one. But at the end of the day, I've done what I needed to do to continue to invest in youth, the things that Kyle's working for, and I'm happy to find ways that we can continue to do that. The dialogue is open. There was a gentleman I met, Keyshawn Rogers. I think he was interviewed. I'm going to be meeting with him this week to discuss some things. I don't think everything that Keyshawn asked for I can do, but there certainly are some things we can do. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that police officers or city employees haven't been a part of a hate group like the KKK. I think those are things that that this time, day and age in 2020, we should be able to do that as we move forward. There were also some issues that I know that were discussed about making sure that officers. It's one of the things Tommy's talked about, wanting to make sure that how do we make sure we deal with mental health evaluations to make sure we're not grinding. It's one of the things that I worry about all the time, putting officers in constant stress like that and making sure that we have an ability to work and identify those things. So there are a lot of things we can continue to keep doing to make ourselves and make our community better. I don't think that, again, that Dream Defenders necessarily won anything by going in the road. I would have done the same thing if we had been outside the road. And it's unfortunate, but what I do think is clear today, and what we want to say is, the committee moving forward is going to be very much dependent upon how we act. Do things happen one time, and there's certainly the ability to work for forgiveness. I'm not perfect. I made obviously mistakes. We read some wrong information today at our press conference. We all do that. So from that standpoint, I'm not going to hold that against the individuals. But what I am going to say is very clearly that if these actions happen again, then the progress we are making and we are moving forward will be curtailed, and will be at that point it can grind to a halt if we don't take things, if we don't respect people's property, if we don't respect safety and public safety. Those are things we've got to do. If you want to end racism and you want to end all these other things we want to do, create more inclusive, it is through respect that we do that. That's got to be the key of everything we do. We can have discussions, we can have debates, but if we're not respectful in that, then we're going to lose those opportunities to make the change. The change will come out of respectful conversation together. And my door is open. There's several individuals from the other day that I'm going to meet with. I'm also looking to catch up with Marcus Baldwin, who I saw and I had a good conversation with. He is the NAACP Pensacola branch president. I talked with him, talked with several other individuals there. I saw Jerry McIntosh continue to work with Movement for Change. I know the things that they're doing. In fact, other people called me and said, listen, I'm sorry, some of the things that happened on Saturday and the disrespect that was shown to you, I'm sorry about that. And I said, I said, I get it. I know that wasn't you, that wasn't there. But again, my hope and what we're doing is to communicate to and to teach perhaps some of those individuals that are in Dream Defenders that you don't have to be disrespectful to work through issues. We can work through things and find solutions, and I'm happy to do that at any point with anyone. But again, we will stop if we ended up getting the behavior that ends up jeopardizing public safety or certainly destruction of private property.
The next question is from Andrew. It seems like one of the big reasons for the original protests at Graffiti Bridge was to protect the George Floyd mural from being painted over. What, if any, solution is being offered for that goal?
Well, we've talked about taking pictures of it and having it there in some way that the mural could be done. I'm sure privately there are a number of different things, but I know that's one of the things we've tasked, and we've talked with PIO about taking some pictures. The interesting thing, and his name is escaping me. I have it on my phone. I met with the artist. One of the things that was cool about Saturday is some of the discussions that we ended up having. I met the artist who did it, and the artist certainly as I think one of the other interviews said, hey, I understand at some point this is the Graffiti Bridge. It's going to get painted over, and I think at some point understanding, he said, hey, I get that, but I want to talk to you about. And what he and I had a good conversation, and we're going to sit down on some more about, is he want to talk about public art. One of the things when I was at on the county and we did a few things with ACE, I'm a huge believer in what public art could do. If you look at Peter, I know I'm going to butcher his name. Kayagama was saying about, he came here with Civicon. He talked about the love notes we create in our own community, the things that we love. Oftentimes, public art is a piece of that. Graffiti Bridge itself is one of those love notes that makes Pensacola unique in what we end up doing. It's Brandon Vessels. It was handed to me here. Brandon Vessels is the gentleman's name who is the artist. But it is doing that public art and finding those places we can put public art that become so integral into what we're doing. Brandon and I are going to meet later this week, and we're going to talk about opportunities in the city that have happened there. I'm going to reach out. I have not reached out to David Bear today, but I did want to reach out and deal with ACE and see what we can do with some public art. I think it just creates those places that we think about that are places in our community that create those sort of special feelings that we have for our own communities. So, and again, I don't know if we're losing power. I'm having my lights flicker, but other than that, that's what we are doing. We do expect to take some pictures. I told Kyle, if we needed to take some pictures and do some other things, we would figure out a way to at least have those pictures digitally. We have the ability to put it on the billboard that's there on Chase, so we can do some things with it, and we'd be happy to do that.
I'm not sure who this question is from, but it says, how much longer will independent living facilities for the elder remain closed to family members?
Two things. One is I have a mother-in-law that lives in an assisted living facility, and I totally agree that this ability to send sitters in and not send family members in seems wrong. I do understand why that this is supposed to happen in phase 3, and these are our most at-risk individuals. My hope was, the governor's office talked about at one time trying to have testing at these facilities where people could test and immediately find out, and then they could go in and see their loved one. Family members could have that available to them. I'm not sure where we are at this particular time with that and what we can do, and I think that's probably what's holding the governor up from making a decision on that. I get why we've got to have safety going in, but it does seem unreasonable that citizens haven't. The best we've been able to do is drive up there and wave in the parking lot to my mother-in-law's window with my kids and wave to her. So it does seem unfair, and it does seem a way we should find a better alternative to this. I don't have it at this particular time, but the hope was one time it was expressed to us that from the governor hearing that the hope was there would be testing at facilities that would allow people to go in and see their loved ones. If we could get to that, that's what we need. and I would firmly support that and figure the implementation. Otherwise, it looks like it's going to be phase 3, which, let's see where we are. We've opened up more. We just started opening up phase 2 on Friday. So at some point over the next couple of weeks, I think we'll see what's happening. We'll get a chance to see what's happened to both number of cases and also percentage. And if everything continues to look low on that, I think you will see us potentially open up. But those are our most at-risk citizens, and I think we just got to be careful.
Next question is, sorry.
No. But I did want to say there is one positive COVID thing that happened, and while Casey was struggling to figure out how to get us onto the right thing and pick this up this morning, I did have the opportunity to see Robert Greer. He is back in City Hall, and it's a great day to have Robert back here. Robert did not have COVID, but he had some other things that were keeping him out for a long period of time. And Robert, it was great to see him back, and I'm very excited about having him back at City Hall, and just wanted to communicate all those. I know there are a lot of different groups that use City Hall. They all know Robert. A lot of citizens out there know Robert. And I just wanted to tell you, Robert is back at work at City Hall, so we feel very good about that.
All right, and the next question is from Jeremy. Sherry Myers has expressed concerns that a historic preservation ordinance that you're putting forth is designed to protect the Confederate monument. Is it?
That's not at all the intent. As we deal with things going forward, we will evaluate. I don't believe that deals with other stuff we were dealing with structures. That's what the purpose of this was, and trying to deal with disposition of property that was potentially associated, anything around vacating waterfront property or other properties that are associated with the DeLuna site. But it could also be applied to other properties that we had within the historic areas. So again, to me, that didn't have anything to do one way with the monument, one way or the other. My decision on the monument is I don't believe at this particular time it's the thing we need to be focused on. I think we need to focus on other things. I think we do have a celebration coming up in 2021 that will be 200 years. And at that point, one of the things we need to be focused on very, very much for our 200th celebration is who we have here. We have 4 distinct groups. We have people who are descendants of those who fought for the Confederacy. We have descendants of those from African Americans that were either freed through slavery or free slaves that were here in Pensacola. And then we have descendants of those individuals who fought for the Union. And then we have people that ended up just immigrating here and have come here since that point. Pensacola and its success is dependent upon all 4 of those groups working together. So whatever we do and however we look to respectfully celebrate 200 years of working together, it's got to be respectful in all of those things and how we deal with that. And at some point, I'm not saying there's not going to be change, but it's not ready for that at this particular time. But I do think at some point we will look and try to figure out what we can do up there on the hill on Palafox.
Next question is from Jim. It's 8 months since the grand jury released the report on the death of Tamar Crawford. Before the coronavirus outbreak, what were the issues holding up the creation of an advisory committee? It seems like setting up a committee should be a short process. Why is it taking so long?
The deliverables we gave in November to Dr. Cedric Alexander were first, training. We believed the most important part of what we could do, that the police that were already in the field, it was much more important to train them and have them ready to understand explicit, implicit bias and what they needed to do. That would have more of an impact. Committees take a long time usually to pull together and figure out what they're doing. I've never heard anybody say the committee was going to do something right away. So again, the issue that we thought was most important for Dr. Alexander was to get there first and do the training. Training started in January. We didn't come to an agreement with him until at the end of November. Obviously, December with Christmas didn't seem the right time to start, so we started in January. We were 95% through at that particular time in November. In March, and from there we had coronavirus. So, the goal of we wanted to do, or at least I was looking at the committee, was asked that we have it in place by 1 year. I think if we hadn't had coronavirus, I think we would have been well on the way to having that committee established by the 1st of July. I think coronavirus has slowed us down by 3 months, and I think that's where we go. But the most immediate need that we had was to deal with training. That was going to give us the biggest impact to making sure that we don't have that we did not have a repeat of the Tamar Crawford. And again, I think whenever we talk about instances, whatever they are, I think the issue is from time to time things will happen that we can't control. Things occur. The issue of what we have rules in place to deal with them. And the question I have is, did we apply those rules fairly, and did we hold the people accountable to it? That is justice. And to me, I believe we did justice by what are already the police procedures that we did. And again, I will remind you that same report that came out basically was fairly critical of the city in making those decisions. But I'm still going to make the decisions I think are the right decisions for us to make and hold people accountable. All of us have to be accountable to the law. There are no kings, as I said the other day. I'm a mayor. I'm accountable to the law. I cannot do things that are outside of my capacity or the right thing to do for that. So I will continue to do what's inside the law.
And I usually go in order, but I'm going to ask this one from Jeremy because it's related, and you kind of already addressed it, but he said, when do you think the Citizen Oversight Committee will come together? Will it happen prior to July 5th, the 1-year mark?
I don't think it was going to make July 5th, but I think if you gave us the 3 months we lost to COVID, I totally think it will happen before October. That's my goal. I think we got to go. Cedric's got to be able to give him time to go do his town halls, and he wants to hear from the public what they want to do. And again, that's what he told me on Friday, and I agree. We ought to listen to the public. So he's going to go out there and do some listening. We got to give him time to listen, then time to put together, and then time for us to implement with council and move forward. So, that's my timeline as far as what I'm thinking. And I think, again, if we had not had COVID, I believe we would have made the July time frame.
And another related question from Jeremy, can you clarify the exact function of the Citizen Committee?
I believe that's one of the things that Cedric would like to. I certainly see it as something that works with the mayor and the council and in community relations with the police and finds ways to figure out how we end up having better relations. But that's my thought. Cedric was the one that said, let's go to the public, let's ask the public, and let's work off that. So at this particular time, outside of telling you that we're going to be scheduling town halls out there, and again, one of those town halls will be virtual. We understand we don't want people who are concerned with COVID to feel like they have to go to one. We're going to do one of them virtually, so you can be here on your computer and you can allow your voice to be heard. So as we move forward, and again, Cedric may decide to do more than one. That's going to be really up to him as far as what he decides to do virtually, but he wants to do that, and I like the point of going out. I told him that we got to go out across the whole city, and we have to do at least one that's virtually, if not more, but we'll see what he ends up doing. But we've tasked him now. He's going to be going out with Lawrence, and his idea is to try to see how he can get out with neighborhoods and find out what it is that they would like to see that be able to do.
This is also from Jeremy. Other localities have deprioritized things like marijuana possession. Why exactly can't the city of Pensacola to tell PPD not to focus on such issues or use something like smelling pot as the basis for a search?
Because the issue is the law, Jeremy. If you don't like the law, change the law. If you don't, that's not justice when I take what one group wants me to do and I implement that over the law. I don't see that as justice, Jeremy. I see that if the law changes, we will address and change with the law. that's the way I see justice. And again, if laws, people don't believe they're just, then the people ought to change the law. My job is to execute the law. My job is not to make the laws. That's council and certainly that's a state law. So that's going to be dependent upon the state to do. So those things have already been in place. We have medical marijuana now. If the citizens wish to do something else, it's up to the citizens.
And this is also from Jeremy. Prior to the road blockage, there seemed to be low or no police presence. Was this purposeful?
I mean, for the most part, the protests have been respectful and peaceful. I think they would have continued to be respectful and peaceful. I don't know why the need felt to go out in there. We certainly haven't felt the need to bring a lot of police presence. It hasn't been our position or our desire to do that. And as long as people act responsibly and do that, everything's going to work out. So, yeah, I mean, we have not seen any reason to bring police in. It's what I said earlier when the issue was talked about militaristic. I see no reason for our police to be there if people are peaceful in what they're doing, and then we'll continue to allow people to their voice to be heard, and we'll continue to deal with this dialogue.
This is from Jeremy as well. After a few days of 1,000+ positive COVID tests in the state, do you have concerns that we're reopening too soon?
I mean, reopening. I mean, we also had a number of things like the protests that we've had. We've had things that have gone on and been there. I mean, these are all part of life and part of what we've got to deal with. I'll say this much, Jeremy, at this particular time, our hospitalizations, our percentages, our numbers are nowhere near where we were even in early April to mid-April. So if we're not there now, I don't see this being the issue now. But obviously, we will continue to keep watching and see where we are and what happens. Again, I'm looking at this from strictly more of an Escambia County, Santa Rosa, Northwest Florida, not necessarily looking at it from the state. What happens in South Florida, it's a long way away from me. I ought to pay more attention to what is happening in Mobile than what's happening in South Florida, other than the fact that eventually we got to send the people down there. I think they may try to go down there this week or next week to go look at the boat manufacturer. But outside of that, South Florida it's a long way from here, and it's not as much shaped in my decision making. I'm much more concerned about what happens in New Orleans, coastal Mississippi, and Mobile.
And the next question is from Jim Little. The City Council will be voting to approve a bid for a roundabout on Langley Avenue and Hilltop. Did this come out of the issue last year about the soccer fields at Hitzman? And have any public meetings or discussion been held specifically on this project before the city sought bids on it last month? Yeah. And was the City Council made aware of this project before now? If so, how?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, we've been discussing this since we started the part about the soccer fields. Again, we went to the neighborhood. We went to Scenic Heights Neighborhood Association. We went out there and talked to them. They told us, I know PC is well aware of the desire to create this, and this is probably months ago. We talked about this back in the fall. So again, this has been something we've been planning, and it is moving forward so that will be implemented. It will be there to deal not only with what happens with the soccer fields, but by and large, it'll be an opportunity for us to deal with a traffic calming measure on Langley. We're in the process of doing other traffic calming measures on Langley, but we went to them. We said, we heard you loud and clear. You either wanted a light or you wanted a roundabout. What is it? Please tell us. The neighborhood association told us roundabout. So we went. I don't believe that was probably a unanimous decision, but it did hold the sway of the majority of people, and so the city is moving forward with that. I think it will do two things. One, it will deal with the soccer complex, but more than anything else, it will just deal with practical traffic calming on Langley, which has been one of the biggest concerns of the Scenic Heights Neighborhood Association. So anything we can do to help. I've talked to lots of citizens on Hilltop. I've talked to them on Langley, and that's what they want to see.
And I do not see any new questions from the media in here, so we'll hang on for a few seconds just because of the delay, but right now I'm not seeing any new ones.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience in working with us get back up after the hurricane. I don't know if something was down with our system, and we're working through that. Obviously, as I said, our air conditioning isn't working this morning, but we'll get through that. We'll get through some of our other stuff. So again, we have a virtual meeting tonight with the City Council, and we will look forward to what we have the rest of the week. We will continue to work forward on moving forward to make Pensacola better, and toward that end, I look forward to working with all of you to do that. Thank you.